Help me renovate the stairs. Oh, that might be a no. Welcome to the first episode of Good Boi Builds. My name is Alexi. This shedding machine is Gnocchi, and my wife Karen is around here somewhere, probably hard at work at a real job. This is a channel where we slowly renovate our fieldstone house, first constructed in the 1840s in Baltimore, Maryland. Today's episode is part one of the three-part renovation of the main stair and hallway area in our house. So, without any further adorable time wasting, let's get to it. Maybe just a little bit longer. Okay, now. As you can see, the staircase and hallway have seen better days. The old plastered lathe walls and ceiling are cracking, are in desperate need of repair. The stairs, which are probably original, are disheveled, covered with layers of paint, and produce some loud squeaking on multiple treads. As far as I can tell, however, they are structurally sound. There is a spooky curiosity to these stairs. Since this is a duplex, the original builders of the residence chose to extend the stair treads through the wall to our neighbor's side, essentially creating two sets of stairs separated by the interior wall. This means that the boards accentuate the sound of our moving feet to our neighbor's side and vice versa. No doubt originally a cost saving scheme, this feature would have created for a rather ghostly experience. Our first few nights living here had our wonderful neighbors not warned us of this sound transfer. Nothing says you've made the right decision more than hearing phantom squeak and steps in the middle of the night in an unfamiliar and dilapidated house. Anyway, since the stairs are sound and the original design complicates ease of removal altogether, the best course is to proceed renovation over the top of the existing structure and raise the landing to meet the new hardwood floors we had already installed in the upstairs bedroom. First order of business is to remove the old tread noses. I don't know why there's a caution tape attached to the stairs when we bought the place. Maybe because a door header was missing. Not a great sign, I know. I use this thing that spins the blade forward to remove things here, and this other one that shakes left and right to get to the hard to reach places. This child's crowbar came in handy here. One down, 12 to go. With the tread noses skillfully cut, it was time to tear off any of the peeling paint and plaster. You don't want to leave anything that is flaking on the walls, as it will show up later after you renovate it. Or so I've heard. Tearing off these old pieces was a little unnerving, but satisfying in the end. Next was the repair of the cracks and crevices in the walls, especially large ones around the pulled up baseboards. We had plenty of plaster laying around from other projects, so I decided to try my hand at filling these with the material. I thought perhaps imitating the original lathe design would create enough rigidity and stability for the application of the new plaster to the gaps. But first, I had to install a couple of blocks to line everything up. I couldn't tell if that black fibrous stuff you see inside the wall on the right is original insulation of some kind or debris that made its way inside over the last 180 years. I tried to find out what type of insulation was used in the United States in the early 19th century, so I put my PhD history skills to work. Although I identified what is considered the most thorough and detailed study of buildings in the Chesapeake region, according to one fella, and I thoroughly enjoyed the images, diagrams, and texts praised by another, as well as how beautifully thick the book felt in my hands. Unfortunately, I quickly hit a brick wall in my research. If anyone knows how buildings were insulated in the 18th and early 19th centuries in the United States, please let me know in the comments. Anyway, back to the video. Uh, that is a lot of dust. Ugh. I don't know why I put this little piece here. Maybe I thought the plaster would not adhere properly. Maybe I thought it was indecent. Yeah, I didn't need to do anything. Yep, just a few more of these little pieces and we'll be good to go. Oh, look at him. He's got a tool belt. Come on. Come on. Okay, on to the plaster. Historically, horsehair, pig hair, and other natural materials were added to the plaster mixture for strength. Later, asbestos filaments were also introduced. That wasn't good. We had our walls tested prior to this project, and luckily they all came back negative. We didn't have any horsehair or pig hair lying around, but I did have an almost unlimited supply of long hair from a grass fed, locally sourced animal with filaments that were ethically harvested. The hair was not oily, and as far as I could tell, would work well for this task. Thanks, buddy. A little bit of water, of course, helps with the adhesion. I really didn't know what kind of consistency plaster is supposed to have. Is it supposed to be soupy or a little chunkier? I just kind of played around with it until it felt right. This was a little finicky, but easy does it. It was starting to look like I was going to use quite a lot of plaster for all the large holes, but luckily we had quite a large bucket left. As I worked it into the area, the plaster became less sandy and more sticky and easy to use. Since some of the gaps were more than an inch deep and plaster should not be applied in very thick coats, I chose to finish the first layer by lightly scoring the surface to make for a stronger adhesion with the subsequent coats and moved on to the stairs and landing area. The subfloor needs to be leveled and adjusted for height. so that the hardwood in the two bedrooms more or less lines up with the boards I'll install in the landing. And for that task, custom shims are the way to go, baby. But first, I needed to make a quick template for the landing area. I didn't have any cardboard laying around, so I asked my neighbors for some. They had a couple of chewy boxes yet to be opened. This set off a text chain about the size of boxes between a lot of them, whose was bigger and all. I tried to be polite and professional, but I was missing something. I just wanted a box, whoever had the biggest. And of course, Gnocchi thought this was a good time to take a break. Good boy. Cutting the plywood subfloor into two pieces made for much easier installation. Anyway, back to the shims. Using the laser and taking into account the thickness of the hardwood floors, the plywood subfloor, and the sound and moisture barrier, I came up with a basic length and thickness for the shims required. Shim A, for instance, you can see that I need a length of 23.5 inches, with one end being 1/16 of an inch thick and the other being a quarter. Shim B needs to be 38.5 inches long and go from 1/16 to 1/4, and so on. To make these, I came across this basic jig from a carpenter on YouTube, and it worked surprisingly well. Is it safe? Maybe. It's essentially just a straight edge made of USB or plywood with a backstop and a couple of blocks attached with screws to the straight edge. The idea is to use the protruding blocks to attach dimensional lumber to the jig with screws as the piece is pushed through the table saw blade. The angle from the shim is made by butting the front edge of the dimensional lumber flush against the jig and the other against the screw that sticks the required amount at the back of the jig. Here's an example. Cutting shimmy that's 39 inches long, with the smaller end being 1/8 and the other being a half. Cutting the piece to the right length first, I then set the screw depth of 3/8 of an inch, being the difference between a half and an eighth. I attached a dimensional board flush at the front, butting against the screw at the back to create that slight angle. Then, when the lumber is attached to the jig, I set the table saw fence to just cut 1/8 of an inch at the front, hoping the back end will end up being a half. As you can see, the result is pretty close to the desired thickness, sometimes being a 16th off, which for framing subfloor application is pretty good. With the shims cut, it's time to glue and brad nail them into place. Just a quick check to make sure everything lines up well. Fighting off boredom while working, I was trying to think of adding a relevant song interspersed with what I could tell was a very boring shim segment. At first, I thought of working in Sabrina's 1987 smash hit, with the switch lyrics of shims, shims, shims. Then I thought I'd have better luck incorporating old Dirty Bastards 1995 hit or something from the Grammy nominated indie rock band The Shims. But I knew these were all a bit poor. In my desperation, I later googled shim song and learned about shim sham, a tap dance routine popular in the US a long time ago when such behavior was tolerated in the public sphere. I guess my point here is that your mind just kind of melts when you're doing such repetitive tasks. In any shim, since the landing was going to get a lot of foot traffic, I wanted to make sure the subfloor was solid as it could be, so I decided to cut my shims running perpendicular to the previous ones for added support. A quick test of the subfloor fit before the final screw and glue. Worked out quite well, and at the close inspection, I think the foreman also approves. At this point, it's been more than a week since my first coat of plaster, and the walls are ready for the second layer. I found it easier to overpack the holes rather than try and get everything plumb because the plaster could be gently sanded off when it dried. It was also time to fill all the smaller holes throughout the stairway and hallway. And there are a lot. Ah, yes. It's quite satisfying to see it done at 5 times the speed. Now, this is the part of the video where preservationists might take offense. I've been trying to figure out how to avoid future deterioration of the walls and ceiling, and as you have already seen, the area has large cracks, crevices, and holes that may or may not expand if there's structural damage. There's no way of knowing unless you completely start ripping off the old walls, repair any potential structural damage, and redo the lath and plaster all over again. This is simply not practical for us. The solution was to coat the old walls in overlapping large sheets of fiberglass mesh and drywall mud that is supposed to give the worked area more integrity. It's not going to save you from damage stemming from structural damage in the long run, but it seems to be effective against your more regular wear and tear and age. The risk here is that all plaster and lath walls effectively regulate the movement moisture whereas fiberglass sheets and drywall mud can trap it, potentially creating conditions for rot and bacteria growth inside the walls. Three things make me think that this is rather unlikely in our case. First, the accumulation of moisture is minimized since the surfaces here are internal walls that do not adjoin bathrooms and don't have any kind of plumbing inside. Secondly, the walls have already been painted with latex based paints for decades by previous owners, in effect counteracting any moisture regulation or plaster and lathe walls supposed to have. And finally, just checking the holes and cracks created during light demos suggest dry environments inside. So overall, I think this will work for us, but it would definitely be interesting to hear how others would have tackled this. Would you have bothered with the fiberglass sheets? Leave me a comment below. With the walls wrapped and mudded, I really had only one question for you all. You like Huey Lewis and the news? Hey, Paul! This was a rather difficult and taxing part of the renovation. The work was dusty and dirty and confined to an awkward and small space. Additionally, since we used the hallway every day, I had to keep the dust to a minimum, and it required me to vacuum and clean the area each evening. That was a major pain. It felt like two steps forward and one step back. I know that for you, this preparation work isn't especially exciting or visually stimulating, but it's crucial for a good outcome. Anyway, I'm glad that it's over. I'm glad that all the major holes, cracks, and crevices are fixed. The walls look like they're much stronger. The steps and the landing area are ready for the next step. In the next episode, I'll actually be installing the new treads, risers, and stringers, putting down the landing, and doing the baseboards. And you'll definitely see more of this guy. I hope you will join me for episode 2, and thank you for watching.